good enough can no longer be the standard. It can no longer be the standard in your business, in your sales, or in your growth. If you're not uncomfortable, then you're not making progress. And if you're not making progress, then you're going backwards. And that's a recipe for all the things that you fear most.
I want to welcome you to my sales podcast, where we have one focus and one focus only. That is helping you, the sales community, and sales leaders create more conversations with more qualified buyers, ultimately leading to improving your sales productivity and closing more deals. Each show, you will hear from sales leaders, practitioners, and influencers to help you find, engage, and connect with more buyers. I'm Mario Martinez Jr., and you're now listening to the Selling with Social Sales Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Zubtitle, a new online tool that makes it easy to automatically add captions to any video in minutes. Don't let your videos get passed over on social media because people can't follow along while on mute. Head to Zubtitle, zubtitle.com/Vengreso, Vengreso to get started. Mr. Dan, the man Waldschmidt, the most edgiest man that I know out there. Welcome to Selling with Social, man. I'm super excited for you to be here with me.
I'm super excited to be here, man. I journeyed far to your New York City landscape there.
To the New York City landscape that we've got going on. For those of you that are tuning in to Selling with Social, Dan's talking about my background here out in the beautiful New York area. So if you like, I can take you out to South Lake Tahoe or San Francisco on this virtual background here.
I like it. I'm jealous. I
love it, man. Well, look, I'm excited to have you on here. And Dan, there's just a ton of stuff that I love about you. And one of the things that I love most about you is just your edginess. That's what you've been known for. That's what you've branded yourself for, is just being edgy, which has created some phenomenal results in helping companies, massive, large organizations to the small funded startup companies, really help drive revenue, all focused around the sales community. So this call, I hope that we can spend some time talking to leaders about how actually some of the things that they can do to be able to drive business and revenue. Is that fair to do?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it. Let's break it down.
So before we get into this, do me a favor. I know Dan Waldschmidt, but not everybody listening may know Dan Waldschmidt. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you came from, and what you're doing right now.
So my background has been in business. I started selling when I was 19 years old. And if you've heard me rant about bad sales books, I've read probably 40 or 50 of them when I was in my 19-year-old self, trying to make money. And I've successfully launched a couple of businesses. Never, until this week, when we launched our new investment fund, never raised a penny. All of my startups or my companies had to sell their way to growth. And for those of you who know me, you know that I run these races that are 50, 100 miles long. We call them ultra marathons. But that's how I kind of work out the messiness in my head.
And one of the things I love about your LinkedIn banner, you've got you, shirt off, running. I don't even know what you're holding. It looks like coffee, weights. I don't even know what it is. But you're holding something, which is, I know you're a runner, but if I'm not mistaken, you're the 10th person on the planet to complete the Run Everest Challenge. Is that right?
I am. Number 10. I'm super stoked because as I've gotten older now, I'm thinking like, how far can I push? And I just turned 40 literally like days ago. And I think it's crazy. I think my best years are ahead for running. My big challenge, I want to run this transcendental 3,100 mile ultra marathon. And I don't know if I can do it this coming year, but I might do it next year when I'm 41. That would be super exciting.
3,100 miles?
Right now, the record is like 41 days, but it's a 52-day race. And you have to run at least 60 miles a day. And I'm like, why couldn't I do this in 30s or 40s, like 30 or 40 days, right? Run 100 miles a day for 30 straight days, 31 straight days, and you've knocked the whole thing out.
Jimmy, how many people compete in that type of race?
It's a big number, like 14, 12. I mean, here's why I like it. Americans, we've now discovered marathons. We're running marathons. We've discovered 5Ks. We're running 5Ks. When you go to Europe, there's a lot of European runners who are, scampering up the mountain like mountain goats and all kinds of things. So there's not been an American who's finished this race. And so I think it'd be pretty cool to be that guy.
Wow. I could barely run a mile.
Hey, listen, you get a bear behind you, you can do a lot. You didn't even know.
That is absolutely true. I love it. Oftentimes here we've got sales, we've got marketers, we've got sales leaders that are listening, business owners. And one of the questions I always ask all my guests is, tell us something nobody would know about you by looking at your social profiles.
So one thing you wouldn't know, and especially if you heard me speak, and maybe if you listen to the rest of this podcast, one thing you may not know is I actually went to seminary. I know that you're surprised because there's lots of F-bombs that are being dropped. I actually spent 3 years in seminary. I spent the other 2 studying government and international politics at George Mason. But I actually spent 3 years of my life, if you can believe it, studying this, New Testament Greek theology. At one time in my life, not too long ago, I was actually quite literate in reading the Bible and the ancient Greek text from which our current Bible is now translated.
Wait, so clarification. You read ancient Greek, or you were reading the translation into English?
No, actually could read. And by the way, for all of you thinking, why did you spend your money on it? It took me 3 years to figure that out. It's a dead language. And I'm reading this language going like, I knew Latin in high school. Like now I'm studying Greek. This is literally all Greek to me. Not sure what's going on here.
Wow. Interesting. All right. Well, that's the first one. So seminary school and reading of ancient Greek. It's been put to good use, obviously, now in business and growing revenue now.
My wife gives me shit all the time. She's like, you know what you are? You're like a Southern Baptist preacher who just gets up there and TD Jakes all over everybody, And she's like, that's why people love you, because you just go up there and regale them with stories. I'm like, I don't know, maybe a little, a tiny bit.
I love it, man. Well, great. Well, so let's get into some meat here, man. You definitely, and your companies and some of the things that you've done. I think we were talking about a story about one of the companies that you were working with. Talk a little bit about that one story, because I want people to tee this up with your expertise. You had a company that returned back, was it $1 billion back to investors?
Yeah, we've raised, my partner and I, $50 million in venture funding and returned over $1 billion in those companies. And what's interesting about high growth category companies is that the idea of high growth companies is actually a mindset. So when I think about business growth, marketing growth, I kind of squash all those together. I'll jokingly tell our company it's all about smarketing, sales and marketing. Yeah, it's really something of influence, but if you throw influence in there, it's like the word gets crazy. So it's about the whole combination of like revenue creation is 3 components. In my mind, it's mindset, it's methods, it's magic. And one of the things that drives me crazy, Mario, is that like 99% of all of our discussion is around methods. And we'll talk to cold calling. No, it's not cold calling. It's bold calling. No, it's not bold calling. It's warm calling. And it's like, you should never reach out to somebody. You should only do referrals. By the way, there's all of these things that are good. I don't want to besmirch them. A lot of them are my friends and they're specialists who spent years studying this stuff.
Sure.
But I feel like we've become scientists. We're under the microscope and we're looking at this 1 or 2% marginalia. And my obsession has always been, okay, grand experiment. And before you choke me, just listen all the way through. What if there were a way to not just make that 1 or 2% diff? What if there were a way to make 1,000% diff growth year over year over year? What would that take? And a little bit, it starts with your mindset. So it's teaching a company look, thoughts become things. What are we thinking? Before I teach you what to say and to write and to build and to design and to grow, what are you thinking inside your head? Because that is the breeding ground, the kind of the culture that from which everything else is created. And then methods, I'm look, here's the dirty little secret around methods. Almost any method works. Right now, I can start a business where we call it Orange Juice Tuesday. And every Tuesday, we serve fresh orange juice for free. And I'm telling you, and it's not just me, anyone listening could do this as well. You do that enough, and it will become a thing.
Right, exactly.
How do you think Movember came around? Do you think people woke up and it's just enough idiots were doing it for a long enough time. We all now want to do it. So, okay, there's lots of methods. Pick one that works best for you. Pick a system that you can get your head around that works for you, and then go execute it. And then become a student of that. Don't just dance around the edges, get way in. Enough with the trial balloons, like dig way in. Find an expert, hire an expert, dig in. So mindset methods, and the last part's magic. And that's where people, they want to get to it, but you got to pay a price for magic. Think about a magician, he does sleight of hand and it just looks fabulous. What you don't know is he's got that, that pack of cards. He's been touching them and using them and practicing for thousands and thousands and thousands of hours. And so if you have your mindset in the right spot where you're thinking possibility and opportunity, and then you've got methods where you have a process and you're managing and measuring and measuring and managing and you're improving, then all of a sudden along the way, there's opportunity for you to begin to create this thing called magic. And that's where it's legendary. And long story short, Mario, that's how you get a company that's $1 billion. And by the way, they're not alone. In the last 6 years, our clients have added 17 billion in new revenue, adopting these very, very, very similar process. Change the mindset, improve the methods, and then have fun when you delight with your magic.
So if you think about, nothing happens until a sale is made, right? Nothing happens. Mm-hmm. So sales is the cornerstone of any organization to thrive and live. And if you think about what you just talked about and the fact that nothing happens until a sale is made, we have I would call it a pandemic that's happening inside the sales industry, in the fact that it's about 60 some odd % of our sales folks actually are making quota, right? Sales folks and sales leaders.
I didn't know it was that high.
Yeah, yeah, right. Exactly. Fair point, right? Yeah. I mean, it is a pandemic, I would say this, and yet every single year, especially when I was in corporate, every single year, we had a higher and higher quota, and we had to hire more people, and we had to be able to hit a revenue number that we weren't able to hit in the first place.
Yeah.
So what is it that you think either leaders or sales leadership, what do leaders get wrong that slows down growth?
So the big one, which is probably very timely for those of you still listening, is this idea of what are you measuring? So one of the companies who's based in the great state of Washington, who makes an operating system that many people use, of which I cannot name, they said, hey, Dan, give us some methods so that we can improve our customer support. And I looked at this and I said, okay, what are we doing? What's the actual process? And by the way, most big companies, if you're part of a big company, your whole company is about process. You've got processes for the processes for the processes. It's just ridiculous. And I said, well, let's get really granular. What exactly communication, what words are said in the middle of a transaction, the beginning of a transaction, the end of a transaction? In my experience, and I don't want to say everyone has my experience, if I have a customer support question, I can't think of many times in my life where I've asked a question, I got an answer, and I was like, oh my gosh, that support from IT was so fantastic. I'm going to go have a bowl of ice cream. That was amazing. Most of the time it's like, okay, you just made me feel stupid. You just talked down to me. I feel like a turd. Okay. All right. Bye. I get the hint. I'm going away. So I said, no. Dan, you don't get it. Dan, we follow up with everyone who has a support request within 24 hours. Our mission is to close support requests. I said, well, that's the wrong mission. That's the wrong mission. So let's talk about mindset. And this is the mistake. So if you're wondering, what's the answer? Here it is. You're measuring the wrong thing. I asked a simple question. And I don't know why I asked it, because it was maybe it's my seminary days. The spirit within me moved. And I said, how many outrageously satisfied customers do you have leaving support? And there was stillness. No, I didn't ask the wrong question. How many outrageously satisfied customers? And of course I said, we don't know. And I said, well, how would you know? No one knew. I said, come on, guys. What do you do if you're outrageously satisfied? You might
tell people.
Tweet about it. Yeah, tell somebody about it. You might say, dude, you guys were awesome. Thanks, man. That was killer. You're going to do something. It's going to bubble out from within you. How might we, here's a key word. Think about this if you're a leader. How might we manufacture that? I'm going to cut through all of the hiccups and the craziness. But I'll tell you, one tactic that worked for us was, and it might work for you too, is at the end of every customer support, because again, we're trying to manage and manufacture outrageously satisfied customers, we said this, Mario, new paragraph. Hey, just close your support ticket out. Super cool. By the way, what other tech issues did you have that we didn't answer? I feel really crazy I didn't ask about it on our last exchange or call or whatever. Hope you're doing great. Again, like 5 sentences. We didn't say, do you have another question? We assumed that you do. So long story short, I could, sometimes when I'm on stage, I'm like, how many people you think responded? The answer is 3 out of 4 people responded to that email. 1 out of 2 who responded. So this is 50% of the 75%. The only way they could get an answer to their question was by this: buying something. They needed a license or they needed a service. And guess what? This big magical company in Washington actually has lots of things they sell. And it just so happened that these other things that they sold could satisfy the demands of these people who were ready to be outrageously satisfied. Okay, you're thinking, who cares? It seems like a lot of craziness. Well, that 50% of the 75% created $236 million in brand new revenue because outrageously satisfied customer. And by the way, one more thing. We don't do quotas. I tell our leaders, don't do quotas. People aren't doing that. We have one single metric by which any process is measured, managed, or executed. 3 words. Is it awesome?
Awesome. Okay.
If your revenue creation is not awesome, you gots to go. You're out. I don't care. You might be there 25 years. You're out. It's amazing to me how people respond when the only measuring stick is this. Is it awesome? And I get it.
But what is awesome? What is awesome measured against?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's measured against what you say is awesome. So someone goes, oh, we need to improve this process. I go, why? Well, because it's this or this or this. That's really hard to quantify. But when I go and say, is that process awesome? And the answer is no, then you automatically know what you need to do to improve it. Or you know that you need help in improving it. Is so-and-so generating enough revenue? I don't know. Do you see what they're doing? Is it awesome? No. How do we coach them? How do we improve them? Marketing. Is the marketing message awesome? No. How do we make it awesome? What would we need to do to make it awesome? And that series of questions creates a spiral that's led to that 17 billion that I often talk about. People say, how do you do that? It's not possible. No one creates 7. Well, it is when you say, is it awesome? Because there's a lot of people that are on our roles, they're salespeople, and we're like, well, Mario, I got to keep Ted because Ted's got 30 years of experience. Well, Ted is a turd, and he needs to go because he's not generating. He's out. And meanwhile, little Timmy, who has 2 months of experience, he's doing things that are awesome. And while he doesn't have the numbers to back it, because he's executing awesomely, I know the law of planting seeds and harvest, which is you plant awesome seeds, your harvest is awesome. And so I'm just going to win. So what are you doing wrong? I mean, think about this. It's really easy. If you're listening to this, grab a sheet of paper. And when you're in your meetings, just ask yourself, is this BS I'm hearing awesome? Like, is it awesome? If it's not awesome, just tell them like, look, guys, I hear you. And I get your logic in your spreadsheet, like thumbs up, man. Super cool that you put that together. Here's my gut instinct on all of this mess. It's not awesome. So what would it need to do or be to be awesome? And you just ask the question. You just ask the question. And it's amazing what comes from that. People level up.
So this is funny. I was in a training with a client. And in that client, there was an individual who was just a couple of years away from retirement. We were teaching on how to leverage, in this case, it was LinkedIn, to be able to drive more referrals and to find people who could introduce you to other people. And he had his laptop closed and he was refusing to do it. So I, during one of the workshops or one of the activities, I went up to him and I said, so-and-so, can I help you? And he said, well, I do my business differently. How do you do your business differently? He said, I work off the good old fashioned, pick up the phone and make a referral. And I said, that's fantastic. That's definitely a method as well. How do you know who to call? He was like, I've got my base of customers that I know that I can trust. And I said, how many more years do you have till retirement? And he said, X number of years. And I said, what is the average age of the person that you get your referrals from? He was like, all my age. And I was like, okay. So is there a possibility that any of them might start retiring earlier, like want to do something differently and you still have to work? And he was like, yeah. And I said, you ever heard of a statistic that 50% of our workforce are millennials? Yeah. So if you only network with the people that are the same age of you and you're not touching the other decision makers, where do you think those other decision makers might be? And he was like, all right, I get your point. The point is, what I knew going into this was that this one individual would probably kick back. I mean, this came from the executive leadership team. And he could do that because he was meeting his number. Mm-hmm. But my question back to them was, is he amazing? Mm-hmm. Is there nothing that he can improve on? Like, well, of course, like he needs to get up with the digital age, right? He needs to be able to do these things. So what you just said is so right. Is it awesome? Is it awesome? How do we make it better? And that's essentially with people as well. Are they awesome? Yeah. And, you know, sometimes that's subjective, I suppose. Like one person may say yes, one person may say no, I suppose. But generally, I think if you were to ask, is Dan Waldschmidt awesome? And there was 5 people in the room that knew Dan Waldschmidt, they would all probably be around the same on the same page.
Hopefully. Yes, you better.
I'm just saying in the workplace, though. In the workplace.
Exactly,
like if you were there. Generally speaking, everybody's going to have around the same conclusion. And so oftentimes we hear this particular statement. It's good enough. It's good enough. What do you think when you hear the statement, it's good enough?
Again, when I was younger, I would have told them to fuck off or something like this. I don't know. Can I say F words on this podcast? Is this
well, we are PG-13, so you've got one F word allowed.
so whoever's editing this, just God bless you, my child. My 40-year-old sophisticated self would say this. I can't speak for other people. Let me just tell you my experience. Let's talk books. So I wrote this book called Edgy Conversations. I'm not selling it. I'll give you a free copy. Here's what's interesting. There are a lot of books, a lot of people writing books. So Edgy sold 550,243 copies as of like a couple months ago when I got my last report. Been translated to 6 languages. I had 4 book deals in 2010. I decided to do it myself because the publishers wouldn't let me do what I wanted. Spent 4 years writing the book. And everybody said to me, come on, dude, just get it out. Just get it out. And I heard people serving up the Seth Godin line of like, just ship it. And I was like, no, you're saying just shit it. I'm saying just ship it. Like we have different letters at the end of that word. So here's what I've known is that, yes, you do have to execute. But the same people who say to me, how did you sell so many copies of your book? That's by one small example, by the way. And it doesn't all hinge on book sales. The same people who say that then look at their own book that's out there in the wild. By the way, people write books for different reasons. Sometimes you want it to go big. Other times you just want it to be a calling card. I get all that. But they go, I don't understand why no one's buying my book. And it's because good enough can no longer be the standard. It can no longer be the standard in your business, in your sales, or in your growth. If you're not uncomfortable, then you're not making progress. And if you're not making progress, then you're going backwards. And that's a recipe for all the things that you fear most. I think the lessons that I've learned are that you do need to execute, you do need to get things moving forward, but you should never accept anything less than a pursuit of awesome. You shouldn't, because your success, your epic growth hinges on your ability to keep aiming and improving until you do something that is awesome. And what's really cool, so what's neat is my 7-year-old daughter, she loves to sleep in our bedroom, and our master bedroom's quite big, but on the other side of the room, we've got this couch that we're like, hey, all right, go sleep there so mom and dad can have a little quiet. But the way she'll go sleep in her room is she'll grab mom's iPad and she watches these videos on YouTube. It's interesting, like watching a 7-year-old, like you like observe their behavior, and like everything you need to know about life is hinged, or even buyer behavior, B2B behavior is hinged in like the 7-year-old girl, because she'll take her phone or iPad and she'll play the first video and she'll give it about like 4 seconds. And if it doesn't, in my words, if it's not awesome, you know what she does? Next. She doesn't even know it, but her pre-wired default decision-making process, her operating system says, if it's not awesome, like move on. And we get older and we get better making excuses and reasons why awesome is not the measurement. And at the same time, we're like, come to these end of the year, and that's what's happening right now, where people are like, I don't understand why I didn't hit my mark. I mean, it seemed promising, and it's because you convinced yourself that good enough was good enough, and it wasn't, because good enough was already watered down by the mediocrity that you were trying to excuse away from the very beginning. And this is why the measuring stick of "is it awesome" pulls you up to this level that you might not have even known had existed. You might build a fabulous career off of mediocrity. I've just noticed that when I have achieved these small bits of success in my life and in my career and in making money, it's because while others have said, it's good enough, let's go, or let's finish up, come on. It's been the times where I've obsessed and obsessed and obsessed and been uncomfortable and been in pain and been depressed and like my brain going, there's got to be a better way. And then, when I wrote Edgy, I've got a copy of the book. When I wrote Edgy, like this cover's waterproof and the pages are nice and slick and there's hand illustrations. I actually had a copy of the book made out of aqueous inks. And aqueous inks are those things in the middle of a magazine that smell. So I had it made out of like lavender. I wanted it to like, as you smell it, it inspires you, right? Calms you down, inspires you. So I get this book back and I'm touching it and I'm looking, I'm like, oh, this smells so good. Later in the day, I notice my eyes are burning. Literally, my eyes are burning. It's because it was all over my fingers and like touching jalapenos, you're touching your face. My face was all red. It was in hives. By the way, I don't even have bad skin sort of disorders or anything like that. So like I knew like if I actually put aqueous inks in a book, I might kill people like that. It's not even cool. But long story short, I think you need to ship, you need to execute, you need to hit deadlines. And sometimes the answer is like, we're going to release it now. We're going to tell people like, look, this is what we have now. We're going to keep trying to level up.
I love it. So I want to talk to you a little bit about inspiring millennials to deliver outrageous results. But before we do that, we're going to listen to this message from our program sponsor. If you're creating video for social media, you know how important it is to have captions on all of your videos. Really, think of how many times you've passed over a video on social because your phone was muted, or you were in a public place, or at work. Unfortunately, adding a caption to videos has been a pain in the butt or an expensive task to outsource. That is exactly why we use here at Vengreso Zubtitle, a new online tool that automatically adds captions to any video in minutes. Zubtitle auto-detects the spoken word in your video and burns in open captions that are timed perfectly. Their easy editing interface even helps you clean up the text and customize the captions so they fit your branding. Visit Zubtitle, that's ZUBTITLE.com/Vengreso today to get started. And now back to the podcast. All right. That was phenomenal insights that you just gave about being awesome and thinking, is it awesome? Is it awesome? Whether it's a process, whether it's a person, whether it's your activities. But oftentimes we hear topics of conversations about inspiring millennials to deliver outrageous results and to be better and to level them up. How do you inspire millennials to deliver outrageous results?
What's really awesome about millennials is they're not as motivated by money as Xers, Yers, and they're not as loyal as boomers, right? So my dad worked 35 years for the federal government. He retired, after being in the Pentagon for forever and a day. And like life was good, right? Xers and Yers, you dangle this bonus and we're like, ooh, which you like the Pied Piper, we're chasing you all the way to Bank of America. But millennials throw many leaders, especially if you're a boomer, for a loop. You can't figure out why they're not loyal. And you can't figure out why they're not motivated by money. And the secret is this, that millennials love a good cause. And see, making money, that's not a cause. That's like a nice to have. That's these are guys who will backpack around the world on like 37 cents, right? They don't even need it. They're living off of local vegetation and pond water. They're fine. They're fine. It'll heal. How do you inspire them? You give them a cause. Let me give you a quick example. When we hired salespeople to our team, we gave them a sword. And it was literally an engraved sword, a $2,000 hand-smelted, hand-forged blacksmith sword. And on the hilt, or on the blade itself, like 300. I think I've got one or two behind me right here on my wall, which none of you can see because you're listening to this. But on the blade, we would have like a Tupac quote. And it would be like, wars may come and go, but my people are eternal. And when you came in, it was like a little bit of a ceremony. You got the sword, you're part of the 300, we're off to battle. One dies, we all mourn. One wins, we all celebrate. We're warriors. And I got to tell you, you give somebody something and tell them once you leave, you have to give it back. And that creates a little bit of like, no. I'm a warrior. I'm on the team. By the way, that's talk about leveling up and being awesome. It gets inside your head and people now know, okay, now I'm serious and it's a cause. So big picture, if you're a leader, create a cause, create a movement. And by the way, this is not something you can motivate with money. You have to be that person. You have to be the person who's cause-driven, mission-driven. And I know I've said it a couple times already, but you know the great Euclides, he got in the bathtub. And when he got in the bathtub, he noticed, wait a minute, water is splashing out over the edge of the bathtub because when you put too much in, it bubbles out. And that's you as a leader. You have the mission. It's inside you. You keep pushing it in. There's so much inside you, it bubbles out. And who does it splash on? It splashes on your salespeople. It splashes on your revenue generators. And a lot of leaders are struggling going, I can't motivate these people. You know why you can't? Because you're not motivated. And your life is all effed up because you're struggling through a divorce because you're working too much and not trying to take care of the people you love, and your finances are a mess because you're spending so much time focused on this other thing you haven't. And so you have no room for inspiration. You know, I'll talk to sales leaders. What sales books are you reading? Oh, I'm too busy for that. I talk to sales gurus, and some of them are like, well, I finished my own book. No, I didn't ask you what sales book you're writing. What are you reading? And so because we haven't filled up the bathtub of our soul with inspiration, motivation, this grit, what spills over is fear and panic and fake intensity and lackluster urgency. And that's what comes out of us because that's what we're putting into us. And so you want to inspire millennials, have a cause, but the cause first has to be a fountain that springs from within your soul. And if you can do that, then you can conquer the world.
Sold.
For the low price of $19.99.
That's fantastic. You know, it's funny because as I think back in my corporate life, right, which was only 3 years ago, and I go backwards in time, oftentimes I was the leader within an organization that was the only one that was creating like a special program, like a cause, a something to drive against, or a reward system and an acknowledgement system, and everyone, you know, moving together. And I could never understand those around me, the other leaders around me, thought, oh, that's really great. And I could never understand why is it that nobody else puts a cause behind this, right? Yeah. What are people running for? And look, I'm 42. So, well, wait a minute. I'm 41, going to be 42 in just a few months. Man, I already aged myself for just an extra year. I didn't need to. But the problem is that I see is that we just get into the rut. It's the same thing every day. And that's how we treat, to your point, you know, what are you reading, right? Now, I personally am not an avid book reader, but I read blogs and articles and watch videos every freaking day, right? From a learning perspective. I like short snippets of micro learning as opposed to like, I think of a book and I'm like, I just go back to my college days and I'm like, I just can't do it, right? I definitely do like micro learning. So I watch your videos or I watch other people's videos, right? The content. But that's a very valid question that you just asked that I believe as sales leaders or salespeople who are listening in right now, what are you reading to make yourself better? Or to motivate yourself for that matter? Or the other one is how do you create a culture? Because one of my guests on the recent podcast, one of the things he talked about was that you could go on the same building, on the same 2 different floors, or even oftentimes on the same floor from one half of the room to the other half of the room, and you could have a completely different cultural experience within that one company. So we're not talking about like, you know, the culture of the company. And then of course the 5 missions or goals that companies want, which nobody even knows what the freaking 5 missions are, right? Like who even cares about inspiration and customer satisfaction? Like what is it, the down and dirty? And I think of most people who think about that, what are they creating amongst their team? A 7-person team, a 1,000-person team, or a 50,000-person team? Most people don't have that cause. And I think that's a super valid point, bro.
Yeah. And, you know, I would say to everyone listening, so, you know, think about yourself. One of the reasons why I have such a regimented morning routine, I drink water first thing I get up. Like, for example, today is Wednesday and I fast every Wednesday. So I'm a little more cranky than usual. I have this like regiment that puts me in a state of high performance. much like Kobe or Jordan, like, why do you shoot 1,000 free throws? Because you want to make the free throw when it counts. So we have these people who are like, if I need to use my mouth to make sales calls, what am I doing to keep the mouth energized? What am I doing to keep my body energized? Yes, I'm an elite athlete for the ultra running BS. Who cares? That's not why. It's as an athlete, it empowers me. Why do I meditate? I'm a head case. I got off a call with the CEO and he insulted me. I just brought him a bunch of business literally an hour ago and he insulted me. And I want to be like, strangle him. I have to meditate to clear my mind so that I can be my best self. It's not about taking vengeance or putting him in his place. It's about me being my best self. So think of yourself as an elite athlete who just happens to be competing at the game of B2B sales. That changes everything. You know, why does Kobe sleep in a cryo chamber or used to? Why is he eating special food? Why is he drinking special hydration? I mean, all of that. Why is he practicing? People talk, I'm going to level up. No, you're not. You're not even practicing the basics. You haven't practiced your sales call. You're going into a meeting and you don't even know what the hell you're going to say. And you're talking like you're a baller. You're not even a player. You're on the sidelines pretending like you're wearing the jersey, so you must be in the game. No, you're a pretender. So what do athletes do? They prepare. They put their body in uncomfortable situations. And leaders, the coaches, demand that of them. So if you're a leader, you should demand, listen, what are you doing for your head game? Who's your coach? What's your meditation game? Right? Seriously. And now think about it. Sales is the most neurotic sport in the world. It's the only craft where you bring in elite performers and you say, hey, I got a great job for you. I want you to go out. I'm not going to pay anything. You go out and deliver me some sales, bring the money in, and I'm going to take a little bit of the money and give it back to you, unless I change the terms of your deal, which I might do if I feel like it, or raise the quota or whatever I'm going to do. But you should be happy with it, and you should be really excited to work at this company. I mean, come on. What are you doing to keep your head straight? And as a leader, you should demand that of your people. Demand it. And you should tell them, hey, you know why this time is blocked off on my calendar as Mr. Leader, Mr. Big Shot? You know why it is? Because I can't be your best leader. I can't be the best thing that you need because you're dropping all your crap on my plate. I need to recharge. I need to refresh. I need to be equipped to get back in the battle with you.
Oh, man. I love that analogy. As a salesperson, you are a sales athlete.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you grow to perfection?
Yeah.
Right. You talked about diet. You talked about meditation or mindset, right? The helping your mind get prepared to be able to go out to win the game. Practice, right? Learning. Football players, basketball players, they don't just spend the time on the court. They're watching videos.
Yeah.
They're studying the plays.
Yep.
They're watching their competition.
Yep.
They're learning what the competition is doing well or not so well.
Yep.
Then they look back and say, what type of plans do we've got, and compare, how can we beat them? How can we one-up them? And more importantly, well, what about me? How's my game? Let me look at the film with respects to how I played.
Yeah.
What did I do wrong? How do I fix that? Am I carrying too much water? Am I too slow? Well, if so, then I'm too fat. And if I'm too fat, well, then you better go on a diet, right? I love that thinking. That's such can I say it? An edgy idea for transformational growth.
Yeah. Again, we talked before we even started recording about perspective and how perspective matters. It matters a lot. And I think this is one of those perspective things. If you just thought of yourself not as a salesperson, I'm running through the scripts. If you said, no, you're an elite athlete, there's 15 dudes who get to sit on the basketball court and 5 are going to be in the game starting. How do you, one, make the team? How do you stay on the team? And then what are you doing in the game to win the game? I mean, it just changes your whole mindset. The stuff that we're arguing about now, I don't speak from the stage and someone will say, I don't know why you're preaching at me to get more sleep and drink water, and why do priorities matter? And like they'll get this whiny voice. Like, I've been making sales for 50 years and I don't need that. And I'm like, well, you've been underperforming for 50 years. I wouldn't brag about it. That's nothing to be proud of. You could have doubled or tripled or quadrupled your income if you would have thought a little bit different, thought like an athlete. And that's why I talk about this idea of awesome, because you don't even care about being an athlete. If you don't care about being awesome, you don't care about any of that stuff, because your mission's just to try to limp along and maybe sort of kind of pretend to hit quota.
I'm thinking about this. The name of this show, Think Like an Athlete. It's such a great illustration.
Yes.
We'll have to do some writing about this one, because now you've got my brain thinking. All right, so this has happened before, and this is probably really the last topic I want to cover here on the podcast. It's happened to possibly you. It's definitely happened to me. And if I think about like my entire career, and especially in corporate, out of 18 years that I spent in corporate, 15 of those 18 years were spent in what we call President's Club, right? Like the Pinnacle Performance Club, like the best of the best, right? So 3 of those years, I can tell you exactly what happened and why I did not hit top performance, right? I knew exactly what happened. And 2 of those years were actually out of my control, right? Moving a role, transformation of a company, dissolution of a company, moving into a new segment, whatever. But I know when the bottom dropped out for me. So whether I'm an individual or whether I'm a leader and the company's underperforming, I think the last number I heard is the average sales leader stays in their position for, I think it's 18 or 20 months, right? And it's even worse for our CMO. So what do you do when the bottom drops out on you?
So the easiest answer, and it's going to sound cliched, but it's really the only answer. And its most simplest form is you start by getting back up. And that's different for each person. It might be minutes, it might be hours, it might be days, it might be months. Obviously, and it's not rocket science, the faster you compress the getting back up, the more time you have to go do the thing you want to do. Again, let me go back to the sports analogy. I think about Tyson is back. 37 fights in a row, he had demolished his opponent. His 38th fight was the first fight he ever lost. And there's all this stuff, how does Buster Douglas beat Mike Tyson? He had the flu on the airplane ride over to Tokyo for the fight. His mom had died weeks in advance. His baby mama was dying of a kidney disease and passed away soon after the fight. He had the flu. And I look at it and go, okay, he was not supposed to win at all. I mean, the fight was billed, Tyson is back. He was a wrecking ball, literally, pound for pound, greatest fighter in the world. You look at, okay, how does Buster Douglas win? And I think the simplest answer is he got back up. And again, I'm not a boxer, but when I look at a rich story like this and dig deep into it, every other fighter got punched in the face. And by the way, this is the guy who said, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face, right? Everyone's got a strategy. You think you can handle me? Let's let you get punched in the face, and then you tell me what you're going to do. And Buster Douglas was the first, and it just happened to be number 38, who realized that you could actually get back up after you've been punched by the fiercest competitor in the history of boxing. No one had more rage. No one had a bigger chip on his shoulder than pre-going to jail Mike Tyson. I mean, the guy was just an angry, angry, angry person. And every other person said, oh my gosh, I'm knocked out. And, look, I know how bodies work, and you get hit enough times and your brain rattles and the lights go out. But you had a guy who got punched and he got knocked down and he got back up to his feet. And that was the 8th round. And something happened in the 9th round and 10th round where Buster Douglas said, I'm not even supposed to be standing right now. Like I should have been knocked out, and I got hit by the most ferocious competitor in the world. And it's time for me to start throwing hands. And he did something that no one else had ever done in the history of boxing previous to that, is he knocked out Mike Tyson. And so I look at that and go, okay, story after story after story after story of amazing people all begin with a similar storyline. Every rebound begins with getting up. Every recovery begins with getting back up. Every major success story begins with getting back up. And maybe it's because I didn't have a TV growing up, and I had to read a book a day growing up. And so I got to read biographies upon biographies from everyone like Cunningham, the famous Kansas runner, to Prefontaine, from runners to athletes to successful business guys. The story arc is the same. And while we like to pretend like we're all different, the story arc of our lives is very similar. It's good times, it's bad times, and then how we respond in those bad times either leads to more bad times or great times. And most of us, when we get uncomfortable, it doesn't even have to be bad times. It should be just uncomfortable times. We are so uncomfortable being uncomfortable that we make bad choices and then more bad choices. And we forget that the best option for us at any one time is simply to make the best possible decision at the moment. And when you're knocked down, get back up. And I think, I've written in my book about struggling with depression and suicide. And I've shared with people, when I was going through some really dark times, the times when I thought about committing suicide were for days at a time. And by the way, if you've never been in this position, you go, well, that's just, I don't even get it. And I hope those of you listening, you don't get it and you're never in that position.
Yeah.
Where you're just going like, what am I doing? None of this is going to get better. I might as well just check out now. It's a really horrific spot to be in, but that's just how your mind is thinking. I've had thoughts of suicide weeks ago, but they were for milliseconds, because when my brain decided to go to this really dark spot, the other part of my brain said, dude, come on, man. Like, really? You had a bad day. You had a bad fight. You had an argument. Come on. And here's what I've learned. Super long answer to a very short question, which is this, is that we decide the course of our destiny by the choices we make. And of course, the choice to commit suicide is committed many times a day, right? I wrote about this the other day. It's just a bad choice. It's horrible. It's horrible. And people make this choice because they don't know of other choices. But the getting back up is the first step for making great choices. It's a decision. And you may not even know what you're going to do. But if you've just lost your job, or you've just missed your quota, or you're in December thinking you may not make it to January because you're going to not make the cut, the secret is this. You get up, because when you're on your feet, you have the option to take steps. And steps can take you anywhere. You can walk around the world. You can do some fantastical things, but you can't do it laying on your back. And so you've got to get back on your feet. Whether you're Buster Douglas facing Mike Tyson, whether you're any number of business athletes who find yourself laid off, riffed, demoted, fired, not up for the promotion, you, in those dark moments, even when your brain is firing, this is unfair, when you feel like I don't know what to do, your answer is this: get back on your feet. Might be literal, you to get on your feet, literally. And then just take a step. Take a step in the direction where you want to go. By the way, the one thing we know in the brain that combats panic, hysteria, fear, uncertainty, awkwardness is this: activity. Activity. That's why we tell salespeople, just do something, baby. Just do something. Don't stand there. Do something. Because doing something is the beginning of the process. My mom used to tell me, Dan, if you can't do something brilliant, just don't do something stupid. And I think that's kind of the simplicity to activity, is we try to have the perfect action. And this is like going back to what we said earlier about when is it good enough. Look, when you're in a dark spot, just take a step. Take a step, because that'll lead to another step. It'll lead to another step. At the end of the day, the steps lead to a really marvelous spot where you find yourself in opportunities that you didn't even know existed. Again, I don't want to overly romanticize this answer, but I have learned that being unstoppable is a choice, and it's a choice that I get to make, and everyone listening, you get to make. It's not because you have the biggest muscles or because you have the most money in your bank account. Being unstoppable is a decision you get to make because you refuse to stop. And it's as simple as that.
Boom. Drop the mic. Right there. Fantastic, man. I love it. I love it. So Dan, if people want to connect with you, what's the best way? Is it through LinkedIn, Twitter? What's the best way to be able to follow you?
I'm all the places, right? But go to danwaldschmidt.com. I share some of my best nuggets in a weekly newsletter. I don't really pitch things most of the time. My goal is to try to take some of these insights, these lessons that I've learned being really, really stupid, and try to explain it to people to say, hey, don't make the same mistakes. Level up in 1,000 tiny little ways each day.
So it's Dan Waldschmidt, WALDSCHMIDT, and that link will be inside of the show notes here for the Selling with Social. And when you reach out to him on LinkedIn, make sure you send a freaking personalized invitation and tell him that you heard him say, just get back up. So Dan, before we get off the air here, one last thing. All-time favorite movie, 30 seconds. What do you got?
By far, Remember the Titans.
Remember the Titans.
We are gods. I love when he says the line as coach, we're gods. And I think that's how awesome I view this. Like, you can move mountains just like God, but you got to take that first step.
Fantastic. Dan, thank you so much, man, for being on the show. And for all of you listening in right now, stay tuned for this message here. Hey, thanks for listening to the Selling with Social Sales podcast. Did you enjoy that show? If so, would you do me a huge favor and give the Selling with Social podcast a rating and review on iTunes? That would be super awesome. Also, if you want to easily find our show, just go to Vengreso.com. That's Vengreso.com and click on podcast. From there, you'll find the Selling with Social podcast. Thanks for listening in. And until the next show, be awesome. Mario Martinez Jr. out. If you ever wondered how we at Vengreso get those really cool captions to any video on social media, well, wonder no more. Use Zubtitle so your videos stand out by visiting Zubtitle.com/Vengreso. You could also see it in the show notes of this podcast.